Hey, everybody. Sorry we're a minute late. That's kind of in keeping with today, I think. Oh, man. Well, welcome to week 224. Um, so we just finished a massive event yesterday called the Anything But Typical CEO Convergence to gather all the guests that we've had on this podcast for the last 5 years. So that was a ton of fun, but it's a ton of work. And so we are all just like super tired. And so I think we had a little bobble on our link going to Damon Burton, who with SEO National, and I've already gotten a bunch of questions from Greg Sauer. So Greg, thank you. We will address all of those questions that you've sent us. And so anyway, Damon, hopefully you're getting that link because I know he's also on. Probably I'm gonna look at the attendees here, and we'll make him available. But yeah, so I'm gonna allow you to talk. Oh, so Damon, I think, is coming on the other one, but nonetheless, so week 224. Adam's here, Jack's here, I'm here, you're here, and if you're not here, I'm sorry, you're going to miss a really good one. So in the meantime, while Damon is checking in, because he is kind of the the key guy that, oh yeah, we just that one little detail. Hey, he needs to have the panelist link. So anyway, it's coming. Oh, and there's Damon. Yay.
I can hear you talking about me. I'm just like, "Hey, where's this link? Let me."
Oh, dude,
We
I'm
made it
so
happen.
sorry. Yeah. Anyway, best laid plans, but nonetheless, good to have you here, Damon. So
Yeah.
I've already
Hey,
sent you
and
some
now
of the
now that I
questions.
see him, hold on a second.
Uh-oh,
Damon,
Oh,
what's
okay.
coming?
I see your
What's coming?
background. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
you're gonna
there
be
you go,
so
buddy.
you're gonna be
Ah,
so
ha,
disappointed.
ha.
You're
Okay,
gonna be
we're
you're
gonna
gonna
riff out. What do you got,
We're
buddy?
going to be
no, you're gonna be
talking some
so
guitars.
disappointed in me.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. Gary, have I told you this story? I might have told you the story. So no. So I do not play. I've been wanting to play. And so the story is you know, as life goes on and on, you don't find more time, you find less time. And so then when COVID happened, I was like, okay, maybe there's going to be a little bit of a downturn where I have some availability. And so I
Right.
bought the guitars and I was like, well, if I'm going to buy I'm going to buy one, let's buy both, acoustic and electric. And
Yeah.
then like the next week, just everything was sold out on Amazon. So I was like, this is great. I made the right call. I bought it on time. And then the opposite happened for me. Business skyrocketed. And so like they sat against this ledge for like a year. And then I said, I should at least hang them. So they're like presentable. But no, I got this guitar tuner right here and everything. And I got this
Oh,
app
you
that I
got the stuff.
like I've
You got all the
I've
stuff.
played around, but I just haven't found the time to commit to anything, reasonable.
That's how I would have described our SEO strategy before meeting you, Damon.
That was our SEO strategy.
Well, if you threw in wasted a lot of money with other people, then you'd have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'd have this pretty well covered.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's funny.
sorry to disappoint you. One day, Adam. One day I'll get there.
Yeah, there you go. Cool.
Well, in Kansas, we call that all hat, no cattle. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, that sounds fairly accurate.
Although you
He's
got to
got the
give him
boots,
credit
got the
for that.
hat.
Give him credit for the
Okay.
gamer chair that he has. I recognize it because my son has one that has the blue instead of the orange.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there you go.
Well, I searched. This is about due for a new one, and I remember when I bought it, it was one of those things where it's like my kids gave it to me for Christmas. So I told my wife, I said it's in the storage room. Have the kids give it to me, and I had to wait for like 60 days to use this freaking chair.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
that's the way it
funny.
works. You buy your own gifts. So
Yeah.
yeah, you get what you want.
Yeah. Well, I'm
So
excited to rock.
so before we launch into all these SEO things, so you've seen the questions that I've teed up for you from Greg. So Greg, these are for you, and I see he's on here, which is great. But before we do that, any current events, what's happening from tax or legal strategy impact to business owners that we need to address before we unleash Damon?
Rate cut, but I would let Jack talk about that because I'm sure he had that in his list. But yay! money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to give out a quote and 10 seconds for a coffee card. So, big summer blowout. If you know where that's from, you'd probably have to have kids to know where that came from. But yes, so half a point reduction, which is good. And although this morning, someone said, well, maybe not so good because now the housing industry is going to pick up and people are going to buy houses and we're not going to have as many houses on the market. You can probably tell what kind of person or what industry that person is in. But I'm like, well, buying and selling houses, that's not a good thing, isn't it? So, but yes, so happy to report that there was a decrease in the interest rate, and the Fed has indicated that there may be more to come. So it's kind of a test the waters and see what happens and see how people react. And if they don't go nutso, maybe there's further reductions, but they really want to see that there's not a huge ripple effect, or the ripple effect is in the positive, not in the negative, or before they do any more, is what I'm hearing, really from both sides of the aisle if you read through those things. So that's the big news flash.
That's good. So anything else from you, Adam, besides yay on rate cut?
I've done a good enough job of well, actually, now that you got me started, Gary, Jack's like, please don't, please don't. It's just kind of a refresh from the last webinar that we did, just because I don't know if I was really super clear, or and at the same time getting asked a lot of questions from my son Miles, so this conversation is fresh in my memory. That and since Damon's on, I can use him as the example versus Scott Upton. So when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, so you see that, just to illustrate the conundrum that we're in here. If you look at the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the effect of that on Damon was that if Damon, made $100,000, pre-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, Damon paid $30,000. Post-Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, Damon paid more like $20,000. So Damon's excited. He's got $10,000 in his pocket. He's like, sweet, that's awesome. So at the same time, that's great for Damon. The US government just took in $10,000 less in money. So like revenue just went down for the government by $10,000. So the theory behind that is, well, Damon's got $10,000 in his pocket and it's burning a hole in it. He's going to put that money to work, right? So he says, I'm looking to expand, and he goes and hires Jack. So that's great. He spent the $10,000 with Jack, but Jack doesn't the way that gets to the government is Jack's got that as income, but then he's got expenses that applies against it. So maybe $2,000 is now Jack's taxable income multiplied by maybe it's more, but anyway, off the same $10,000, right? So that $10,000 that the government used to take in, even though it was redeployed and given to Jack, will only result in $400 to $500 to replace it. So you can just see sort of the conundrum of that's got to be an ass load of growth or a whole lot of expense cut, to offset the $10,000 that the federal government gave up when they gave Damon that rate cut. And again, I'm not for it against it. Well, actually, I mean, as a taxpayer, hell yeah, I'm for it. It's just that's just the math problem of what has to happen when you give a tax rate decrease. There either has to be there has to be a massive spending cut associated with a massive growth rate, to offset the $10,000 that the government just stopped taking in revenue. So just, I'm only saying that to say when someone says, the tax rate's going to grow the economy, that's probably true, because now Damon's now spending the $10,000 that he otherwise was given to the government. However, that will not end up back in the government's pocket. So the government's got to take some further action to then not have to rack up more debt. So I'll shut up now. Soapbox done, Gary.
All right,
that was kind of apolitical, right?
I thought you
yeah,
behaved
I'm
yourself quite
getting a
well.
thumbs up. I'm
Good
giving the
job.
thumbs up from Jack. Like Shoemaker Legal hasn't walked in and said, "Dude, why do you keep on doing this with this guy?" Like,
I'm also not cringing, so it's okay. You haven't passed the cringe factor.
No, yeah, that's right. Yeah, LinkedIn, flame on.
Yeah, that's reserved primarily for X.
Yeah.
That's where it really gets going. LinkedIn is still pretty good. Yeah, you'll find kind of pockets of flaming, but it's still pretty civil. But before we launch, I want to give a little preamble for Damon. So anybody that is new to what SEO means or what it stands for, it's for search engine optimization. All right. So if I'm going to Google or whatever, Firefox or Safari or whatever you're using for your search, and you type in super awesome legal firms, you want Shoemaker to come to the top. At least Jack and his partners do. But what happens if Shoemaker has this amazing site? They have these amazing people like Jack Santinello, but when you go to search for them, you can't find them, and you can't remember the name of them. Was it Schumacher? Was it Maybe, I don't know. Something had something to do with shoe. Oh, well, if you don't have good search engine optimization, you're like the tree that fell in the woods. Did it make a sound? I don't know. I don't know. We ran into a lot of problems, and Adam kind of alluded to it early on, but we spent a lot of money with well-intentioned firms that said they knew SEO, that, they were kind of general marketing firms or digital marketing firms that said that they knew that. And we gave them at least a year to prove that they could make it work. Oh, we'll just keep working. And they would go and screw around with our site and keywords, and zero, like no benefit, so like, well, is this just all smoke and mirrors or not? Well, Damon and I are connected on LinkedIn. We're in a group, and I've been reading and watching his stuff for a long time. And when our team came to me and said, hey, we need to find another group to help us with our SEO. We've got a decent site and this and that, but it's like, we need some help. I said, I'm not going to put my finger on the scale, but I do want you to talk to Damon Burton and just put him and SEO National through the paces. They did, and they're like, holy moly. And we saw results quickly. And they have an amazing experience. And guess what? SEO National focuses on one thing, SEO. And they actually have a lot of people. I mean, it's a very large firm that gives you really white glove service. And this is not an advertorial for Damon. He didn't ask for this or anything like that. I'm just passionate about, like, oh, good, we finally found somebody that actually knows what the heck they're talking about, and they are actually producing results. So that's what you want. So Damon, anything that you want to add to that? But, with some of the questions that we got that I forwarded to you from Greg, the mic is yours.
Well, Gary says that's not an advertorial, but I'm going to run that as my next ad. Thank you, Gary.
Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of well-intentioned agencies out there, but usually where you run into issues is just what you illustrated, is it's really hard to do marketing good. And so it's even harder to do a variety of different forms of marketing well. And so that's not uncommon to run into a lack of performance on an agency that does it all, right? And so it's kind of, what's that saying? Jack of all trades, master of none. And so it's very similar to marketing. I mean, the logistics behind what you have to do, which we'll kind of get into, to do SEO well, you have to have a well-oiled machine across a lot of tools and people. And so to do that while also doing paid ads and email and social media and web design and all these other things, it reduces your probability of having success. So yeah, I'm excited to talk, and I got the questions here, and we can kind of see where the conversation takes us.
All right, cool. Well, let's go ahead and tee up the first question that he had sent, which was, hey, Greg, thanks for taking the time, by the way. Appreciate that. But he said, hey, what are the top 5 SEO metrics that should be measured? So, Damon, what are those top 5?
Yeah, so I don't know that I'll have exactly 5, but I can tell you what the top metrics that you should pay attention to. And so in the beginning, it's going to depend on, are you an established website? Do you have historical credibility and content, or are you brand new? Or maybe you have a historical website, but you have no content, so you're effectively starting at ground zero. So all the traffic on search engines is on page one. And so what's really important to understand about SEO is progress versus monetization. And so Gary talked about in past SEO agencies, there was an expectation that was set of give it time. And there's a pretty common expectation where you give it a year. Now, the problem with most agencies is they don't explain why it takes a year. And that's where progress versus monetization comes in. So as you're shopping around SEO or you're considering doing it yourself, probably the first expectation to have is the first thing to have in line is realistic expectations. So let's break down progress versus monetization. So let's say whether you have a new site or not, you're starting way back on page 20 or page infinity on Google. And so you start doing all the work, and we'll probably talk a little about what that work includes. But now you're 3 months into it. And so you've now gone from page 20 to page 15. So you've jumped 5 pages on Google, which is a substantial increase. You are going to have absolutely zero traffic from that. And so now you go from page 15 to page 10, page 10 to page 9, page 9 to page 5, page 5 to page 4. Even more massive increases. Still likely zero traffic because 90% of the traffic is on page 1. So few people go past page 2. And so that's where the progress comes in. So you can be doing SEO, and the first metric you want to pay attention to is your rankings. Where is your position on the search results? And then once your rankings tip on to page 1, then you can start to transition. You'll always track rankings because you want to watch the ebbs and flows. And it's natural to have kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So as you see big increases and then every once in a while you see kind of a minimal decrease, that's normal with the shuffles. But when you get to page 1, now you can, in addition to rankings and tracking going from page 1, position 9 to position 7 to position 4, now you can start to pay attention to traffic. And so position 1 gets 30 to 40% of all the traffic. And so there's even a massive difference from position 1 to position 5. The first 3 positions make upwards of 70 or 80% of all the traffic. So the breaking point from position 4 to 2, and especially 1, is very significant. So you pay attention in the beginning to rankings, which then translates to ultimately traffic, and then traffic then comes conversions, and conversions comes to sales. So that's the 4 that I would say come to mind. So, I could probably make up a 5th one, but those are the 4 that matter.
That's good. So page, ranking, traffic, and conversions.
Conversions, and then ultimately, sales, leads, dollars, whatever your conversion actually is.
All right, cool. Maybe that hits this, maybe it doesn't. You tell me, but how would one accurately measure those metrics and what would be the acceptable levels? I think you really hit a lot of that with the ranking and the page number, right?
Yeah, I mean that's going to be the majority. Ultimately, that's what matters is dollars. I just did a 2-day live training, and there was an interesting comment that came up, and when I did this training, I was expecting a lot of people to register that wanted to learn SEO on their own. But what was interesting is probably 70% of the group, there ended up being 50 people, and of probably 75, 3/4 of the room was other agencies wanting to do SEO better or improve their SOPs. And one really interesting question that one of them asked was, well, it was this conflict where I was talking about ultimately money matters. Like you're doing all this for money. Increases, rankings go up, should translate to money. Traffic goes up, should translate to money. And they said, well, what if they're, number 1 and they're selling, but it's such a specific word that they don't have a lot of traffic? And I said, who cares about the traffic? Do you want traffic or do you want money? Ultimately, it's the money. And so it's like, would you rather have 9 in 10 people convert for a very specific term that is very relatable to your audience, that very specifically bridges the gap between what they're searching and the product or service you offer? Would you rather have 9 out of 10 people buy because you did your SEO so well, or do you want to go so broad that you have 1 out of 1,000? And so you really ought to pay attention, don't get caught up in the vanity metrics. Ultimately, it's not traffic. Traffic does often imply the opportunity to increase revenue, but ultimately the goal of this is revenue. So don't get caught up in if you have massive amounts of traffic, and don't always focus on whatever word drives the biggest search volume, because the broader the word, the more diluted the lead is, the less qualified the lead is. So just make sure you pay attention to, where you're actually spending your time and attention. Is it to actually get to an ultimate goal of increasing revenue, or are you caught up in just going for the broad vanity metrics?
Yeah, that's good. Next comes into the question of timing. Like, what timeline would one expect to see positive changes in metrics when a proper and effective change in SEO is made to a site?
Okay. So we talked about return on investment and the truth behind why it takes about a year. But let's talk about like an average rollout of a campaign, and that kind of bridges the gaps in between. So when you first start SEO, at least the way that we launch an account is like, hey, welcome to the team. Let's schedule onboarding. So when you engage on SEO, your first week is just getting to know each other, figuring out, where the money is. So usually you get together and you walk through with your agency and go, okay, who's your ideal buyer? What's their avatar? What are their pain points? What are your strengths? And then from there, the agency should take that and start doing the research. So you want to really front load your research, because the one thing that's different with SEO versus paid ads and other forms of marketing is you have to invest a lot into structure and content, which I'll get to next. And so you can't pivot as nimbly as you can in paid ads. It's like paid ads, you could run a bunch of ads for a month and go, oh, okay, we see what works, we see what doesn't, completely shift directions. You can't, or you do not want to do that with SEO, because we talked about progress versus monetization. So let's say you're 9 months into this, you're almost on page one, you're almost to the point of monetization, and then all of a sudden you realize, holy crap, we're targeting the wrong thing. Then you have to start all over. So I'll give you like a quick example. We had a client that came in and they said, hey, we do electronic manufacturing. So they use little circuit board components to build final products. It might be your laptop, might be a camera. And the agency that they were working with prior to us, 80% of their targets, their time, and their money was going towards circuit boards. They don't sell circuit boards. They acquire circuit boards and then put the final components on them to make a final product. So they were going after the wrong thing and burning time and money over something that they can't convert. And so now they had to pivot. And so they wasted all that time and money. So you want to really front load your research to make sure you're going to create the right trajectory. Now, after you go you dig through the data and go, these are the words that we can monetize. Now you have to build a content strategy to support those, because you can only show up on Google for what Google can read. So you have to be really intentional about the content that you put out there. So from there, I would recommend mapping out a content strategy. So I'll kind of talk to two audiences, right? You're either going to hire SEO out or you're going to do it on your own. So I'll try and hit both of them. So if you're hiring it out, your agency should then continue the research to go, okay, where is all the money and how do we bridge the gap between the things that are ideal buyers search on Google with content that will bring them in the door or solve their problem or nurture them, and then connect them to our product or service. And so one of the biggest things that I see people make mistakes on in their SEO strategy is they write for the sake of SEO instead of, they write for the sake of writing instead of writing for the sake of intentionality. And so if you're going to be putting out content, make sure it's content that attracts a qualified lead. So another example is we had a client in the real estate space, and they came over and said, we're ranking number one for all these things and we have zero traffic. Well, one of the examples of what they ranked for was something like how to get rid of bed bugs in a rental. I don't find it very compelling to read about bed bugs on a rental when I'm looking to purchase a home. So they missed the mark twice. Bed bugs isn't a compelling topic. And if you're writing for rentals, but your ideal audience is buyers, you completely miss the mark. So focus really heavy on the intentionality behind your content. Now, week one, onboarding, it's going to take another 2 weeks to pull through data. And then after that, you either finalize your keywords or the agency will present them to you and you all mutually agree on the targets. And then after that, it's a giant content machine. And so then you have to research, draft, publish, distribute all the content. And so that's where now you can start to see why SEO starts to take time. So you're probably 2 to 3 months into this just to get the foundation laid. And then after that, it's just a giant reoccurring content machine. That's kind of the condensed version. There's more things in between, but
Yeah, that's good. What's one of the things that we learned was with some of our other failed attempts, and I'm not trying to disparage these other people, but they were just probably jacks of all trades, or they had some mastery in one area, but they were trying to be jacks of all trades because they want to be full service or whatever. But they were using SEO strategies that may have worked 5 years ago, but that has all changed, and they were actually working against what the algorithm and how it's working now, right? So that kind of ties into this one, which is I've experienced that refreshing the information about the website to search engines led to short-term noticeable increase in viable and pertinent calls happening. We currently receive 90% spam calls, and then we speak to our SEO vendor, and then within a few days we receive significant increase in quality calls for the next 1 to 2 weeks. Interesting. Can you speak to that?
yeah, I mean, I don't know what they're doing specifically, obviously, but where my head goes is, these are two different topics in my mind. So the refreshing information, I would recommend against, to Gary's point. What may have worked at one point doesn't work now. I don't know that refreshing content ever has, but I've been running the agency for 17 years. I do SEO for big players, Tony Robbins, Russell Brunson, and I've never incorporated refreshing information on a website as a reoccurring strategy. What we do is we front load the refreshing of the content, not so much for the gamification of refreshing it, but for the intentionality of making sure the content's relevant. And so when we first look at a website, we, in addition to creating an ongoing content strategy, we audit the current content. And so you want to make sure that there's a couple things that we're looking for in auditing the content. Largely, it's to make sure that the content is unique. So if you've had SEO in the past, there was a strategy where it was quantity content over quality. But that changed a long time ago, way back in 2011, 2012. And so Google came out with a major algorithm update called Panda. And they actually had a major update just this year, March 2024, that was comparable because of AI content. And so what we're looking for is, was the content mass produced from back in the day with the intention of gaming SEO with quantity over quality? So we're looking for redundant topics and thin content. Now, after you scrub that content, I'll give you two tools that the audience can use. One is copyscape.com and the other is siteliner.com. So they're both sister sites, but they do two very similar things but have a distinct difference. So Copyscape will audit your content against external sites, against other websites. What you're looking for is to see if you unintentionally, or sometimes when I talk about this, some people go, "Oh crap, I did that. Yeah, I just don't know how to fix it." And so if you have unintentionally or knowingly, if you want to check if you have duplicate content across your website that was sourced or repurposed from other sites, then Copyscape will check your domain against others. An old strategy was take content from your competitors, take content from Wikipedia, and you'd put it in what's called content spinners. And these content spinners would just shuffle around paragraphs and synonyms to make quote unquote unique content. And so Google caught on to those patterns and is looking for these. Now, AI, which is a whole other conversation we don't need to fully open unless you want to, but just
I
the
want to go down there. Just saying.
okay.
We do.
So the short answer for now is AI is largely just a more glorified content spinner. It takes a giant database of pre-existing content and shuffles it around. And so we're looking for that. Now, the sister site SiteLiner does this similar thing, but checks your website against itself. And so it checks your internal pages to look for redundancies. So when we go back to the original question of seeing refreshing content, we front load the structure and content updates and then never ever touch it again. So if you look at SEO from three core fundamentals, it's one is how good or bad is your website built? And it's things like, does it load quickly? Is it mobile friendly? Does it have clear call to action? Really simplistic concepts. The second thing is content. Like we said, you can only show up for what Google can read. And the third is external credibility, which is one of the questions coming up, which is backlinks and external mentions. So when we talk about, refreshing, you front load your structure, then pillar number two is ongoing content, but I do not touch existing content because on the opposite side, there is value in stability. So we front load the structure and the content and then don't touch it other than adding new content to it, but we never go back and switch things up. Now, on the 90% spam calls, this could be a variety of things. One, it could be has nothing to do with SEO at all, which is my vote. It's probably something else. It's probably them going, oh crap, the client's onto us, hurry and run some paid ads. And so there's probably a different component where these leads and these calls are coming from that they can pull the levers because you can't pull levers dynamically in SEO. It's a long, slow play. Now, somewhere in between, what might happen, I don't think on a consistent basis, is due to the refreshing, Google can do what's called sandboxing. So just like we do the one-time refresh to fix it, Google might be going, is this a one-time fix to make things better, or are they trying to game us? And so there's theories out there that sandboxing is when Google goes, let's see if Gary's messing with us, and let's give him the benefit of the doubt and move him up or down and see how the website reacts. Do they then double down on the changes and do more? Do they revoke them because they get scared? Who knows if there's some truth to that? But in my experience, I've seen that many times. So they're probably touching things they shouldn't be touching. And as far as the quality of calls increasing or decreasing, it's probably something other than SEO because you can't pull levers that quick in SEO.
You bring up a really good point, and that is, if I'm going to hire a mechanic, I want one that is well versed in the current computer systems and that sort of thing of my car versus somebody that was working on my 1976 Ford Thunderbird with 4-barrel carburetor and no computers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that seems to be happening in the marketing world for some reason, where they're just not keeping up with what is currently happening in that fast lane of algorithms and all that kind of stuff. And so I think that you make a great case, and this isn't an advertorial, but it's like if you just specialize in this one area, that's where your attention is, and you're just on the cusp all the time of what's happening now. Whereas if you're spread across a bunch of stuff, it's just hard to keep up.
Yeah.
And so that leads to this question that we got from Papa Joe Farrell. Good seeing you yesterday at the CEO Convergence. And by the way, Damon, it was good to have you there last year. You
Did you
flew
have
out
round
on
two?
your dime. Yeah, you flew out on your dime. Anybody listening to the Anything But Typical podcast, look up Damon's journey, and because he was on the episode last year, which was really good. But he says, hey, if your agency or website developer has not addressed SEO or given you any information on performance, have you probably made a mistake in selection of an agency for your new website?
That's a fair question. I don't necessarily fault them if you hired a designer, right? You hired a designer, not a marketer. So I think the question it more depends on what expectations you communicated that you wanted, because there are, we do a lot of design because it comes with the territory of SEO, but we don't actively promote the word design agency. But some of our clients, because we do so much design for our SEO clients, sometimes they'll send referrals for design only projects. And so we set the expectations of what they're getting. So because we are at our core an SEO agency, then we're able to add, icing on the cake and go, look, we're going to do the design. We're going to throw in these one-time things where all the structure stuff, we're going to make it load quickly. We're going to make it mobile friendly. But after that, we're not doing any reoccurring components of SEO. And what did we talk about earlier? The structure is just the foundation. So we tell them straight up, like, don't get this confused. Though I said the word SEO and we're going to help you with the foundation, you will not get a return on SEO. You're paying for the design. If you also want to do SEO, it's this other scope, or here's what you need to look for and somebody that you're shopping around. So I wouldn't fault the designer. I think it's in the expectations of what you ask them for.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I'm curious, from your perspective, Damon, what's the percentage breakdown of people that come to you and say, man, I know I need to do something about this. I don't know jack squat about what we're doing. Man, I really don't want to pay for it, but I want to learn. What's the percentage of those that actually are do-it-yourselfers that will take your advice and say, all right, we're going to do it versus, hands up, you do it, and I'm going to pay you to do it.
Oh man, so I could probably answer this two ways. I could answer it me directly, and I could answer it probably as the industry. I'm a little bit more fortunate where I don't deal with tire kickers as much, just because of
Yeah.
most of the people come in because of referrals or reputation. So it's not as often, certainly was more back in the day, but I get it every once in a while. And so as you become an expert in whatever it is that you do, you develop a sixth sense of who's serious and who's not. And so I can usually tell pretty quickly just based on the way they ask a thing, where they're at in their SEO journey. And so if
Yeah.
I know that there's somebody that's likely isn't to commit, I still want to help them. And so that's why I wrote my book. And so I'll just point them to my book and give them a copy of that. Now, sometimes what happens is they'll read it and they'll go, holy crap, like this is so much stuff, or I don't have the time or whatever. And then they'll convert. Now, the industry as a whole, they probably get that a lot more than I do, because SEO is conceptually is not hard. It is very basic fundamentals, but where people deem it hard is because the quantity of simple things you have to juggle over the amount of time you have to juggle them.
Yeah.
But conceptually, it's just those three things: have a nice structure, have good content, and have good credibility. That's it. And so, you would just we just talked briefly about algorithms and things evolving. And over my 17 years in this, it's always been those three core fundamentals. And so when you have these agencies probably the only thing that's changed within those is Google's focused more on quality than quantity. So it used to be a quantity game, and now it's transitioned to a quality game. And so if you don't get distracted by shiny objects, if you don't get caught up in how do you gamify this and how do you cut corners, and you embrace delayed gratification, then SEO becomes a simplistic concept that's sustainable over a long period of time.
Yeah, that's good. We talked briefly, but we've talked a lot, on a few episodes about AI, right? Oh, AI is coming, it's going to change, and everybody's job is going to go away or whatever. But there are applications of AI that you better be paying attention to. And we've talked about some of those things on this podcast. I'm curious, like, what's your perspective on AI with regard to content? That pillar of, good SEO or SEO inputs. And where do you see AI and how Google is addressing that from original content standpoint or whatever? Is it welcoming AI or is it punishing it? Like I'm just curious what you're saying.
Yeah, but Adam earlier talked about Flame On, so this will be my version of Flame On from other SEOs because I'm the anti AI guy. So AI is cool, right? Like I get it. I get why it's attractive and people use it. But to your point, is just the pillar of content output. So you can use it for other stuff. Use it for everything you want other than SEO content output. If you're not doing SEO and you're doing paid ads and you're doing emails, use it there. I don't care. It's just on content output. Why? Quality over quantity. And so when AI first started to come out, at least in its current commercial interpretation, it was nearly about 2 years ago. And so when it first started to come out, my red flags immediately went up from an SEO perspective, because what did we mention earlier? AI in its current form is largely a giant database that repurposes existing content. And then what
Yeah.
did we also talk about? Google's played this game before. They punished a lot of these mass-produced low-quality content through those content spinners. So when this algorithm came out back in 2011, 2012 called Panda, what it did is look for low-quality, thin content, repurposed content. And so there's a lot of different paths this conversation can go. Now, if you think about when ChatGPT came out and then Google came out with their version called Bard, like it was like less than 6 months later. The technology at the depth that they would need to release the product within 6 months is highly unlikely that they birthed it and produced it within 6 months. They probably already had it and didn't want to release it until they were forced to because of competition. But they didn't want to release it because it could eat into the revenue model, which is paid ads. And so they
Mm.
probably already had the product. And when it got pushed out, then I think where they've already played the duplicate thin content game before, they I think there was a trailing time where AI just produced content at a scale in which they had to catch up. And so there was a gap in between when ChatGPT was released and when things started to get punished. And so over those months, I started making posts going, look, use AI for this and that, but don't use it for content output. And here's my theories why. And then, of course, a bunch of people would be like, nobody cares. And then Google would make like a little comment that's like, we don't care if you use AI as long as it's not used for manipulation. And so that was like their PC uh, commentary of like, knock it off, guys, but we just have to like play nice. And so everybody would, a bunch of people would reply to my commentary on this and be like, look, they said a thing where it's like not a big deal. And I'm like, yeah, but read between the lines and you're doing the thing that they're telling you not to do. So then I start to tell people like, Google's played this game before. They just need a time to catch up. March 2024, Google caught up. And so what happened is over these algorithm updates, like what people deem a major algorithm update affects 1 to 2% of search results. This huge one called Panda affected 20 something percent. That was
Mm.
massive. This AI based one that they came out with in March 2024 affected 40%. So it's the biggest algorithm update as far as percentage of impact on queries that I've ever read about. Now, of course, the people that are all in on AI come in and they're like, it doesn't say anything about AI, which is true. It didn't use the words AI or artificial intelligence in the algorithm update. But what it did say is don't mass produce content at scale for the purpose of manipulating search results, right? Which is all the reasons people are using AI for content output. So over those months or years, we'll use AI sparingly for research. We use it absolutely zero for content output. And over those years, the 2 years, then I would start to see, you know, comments on social media, and, I'm getting punished and I don't know why. Does anybody have any clues? Meanwhile, all of our clients are either neutral or up. And so I get these constant private messages nearly on a weekly basis from other SEOs going, my clients are tanking and I don't know what to do. And nearly every time I look at it, if it's not just a fundamental thing like structure, it's because they jumped on the AI bandwagon. So you can read all you want, but I mean, when it comes down to actual data, signs point to not using AI for output. And what's funny is I had somebody else made a post the other day and they said, here's all, they had a screenshot of Google made a tweet or something, and it's like, oh no, they had a thing in their tool that says, use AI, use our AI tools to help you with keyword research and content and this and that. And this guy made a post and said, here's to all the people that poo-pooed on using AI. Google's promoting it now. What do you think about that? And I'm like, even bigger red flag, pretty much always do the complete opposite of what Google says, right? So every time they come out, it's almost as if Google has all these cool free things or cheap things, not because they care about you, but because they want your data. And so
Yeah.
where my mind went was they just want to see how people use this AI. And so if they intentionally say use it for this purpose and they can track people using it for that purpose, well, now they can see the patterns and how people use it for that purpose.
That's good. So Craig had to bow out, but for a lunch meeting, but he said this is very interesting. So just so you know. And Richard Morel, good friend, he says, hey, if I have a website developer that I like, but they're not SEO experts, can I bring in an SEO expert without handing over ownership of the website? Or does an SEO expert have to control the whole thing? And a follow-up is, should I expect my web developer, SEO expert, and social media manager to work together? Yes. So
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, you can still have a designer. You just want to make sure that they have clear expectations of what the responsibilities are. And so, the where you usually see the conflict, because we have a lot of people, a lot of clients that, they have in-house designers and things like that. And so we have to establish our role and clearly communicate where things can accidentally be undone. And so a designer's role is to make things look pretty. And a lot of times that doesn't mean that it makes them convert. And so when we come in and we audit these, part of that initial setup and structure optimization is conversion rate optimization. So we look at things. So like one example is one thing that we see very regularly when we audit a client's website is we see these carousels, these rotating headers, the sliders at the
yeah.
top. And there's a great article if you search Yoast, Yoast, Yoast sliders suck. And it's like human nature for us to want to put these sliders in. And I did it for years. And even when I read the data, I still had to tell myself not to do it just because I knew it was wrong. But, human nature tells you to do it for some reason. And I think the reason why we like to add these rotating images is because we want to tell customers about all of our cool stuff. And so we throw a bunch of images at it. But the problem it creates is now you've diluted your value proposition. And now you've confused the client on what the call to action is. And now you have multiple images with code that rotates them, which slows down your website, which increases the quantity of people that exit your website, which Google sees the people exit and go, this isn't a great website. Let's not show it as often. And so these sliders are a common feature that designers add because there's some maybe aesthetic appeal, but it doesn't actually help you monetize things. And so usually when we come in, we remove things. We don't add things, we remove things. And that clarifies the path for your customer and holds their hand and takes them to the call to action that you want them to take. So usually the conflict is in what their roles are. And so it's not that one is right or wrong, but ultimately you have to decide, do you want to look pretty or do you want to make money? And so a lot of times we have to come in and go, look, we have to remove these things, or, you added this video because it looks cool, but it's slowing it down. And so, do you want bragging rights or do you want money in your pocket? And so they can still work on things. They can still build new pages. Very rarely do I see that there's the perfect balance because the objectives are different. Design is usually aesthetic, and then marketing is monetization. But they can certainly do both. And whether you have a designer or not, like we mentioned earlier, the 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 design updates are one time. They're front loaded. You fix it. And then after that, you're really not touching it. So I don't know, there's not often reasons to have an ongoing designer other than maybe every once in a while you need a new page built. And so in that case, what we do is we try not to interrupt the creativity behind the branding other than if it influences conversions. And so then we'll bring it to the attention of the design team and say, look, where's the balance? We understand why you did this visually. Here's the issues it creates on our end. Like, how do we find the middle ground? So yeah, I mean, we mutually deal with other designers all the time. You just have to figure out what your priority is on objectives.
Yeah, that's a great series of questions, and I like your approach because we're in the process of that right now. We did a complete website overhaul 4 years ago in the middle of COVID. Right after COVID started, we went from WordPress to HubSpot because we wanted to ditch Salesforce. It was just too complex for our team, way too many bells and whistles, and it just was not effective. It's a great platform. It was just a Ferrari when we needed basic transportation, and then people were popping the clutch and spinning out in the Ferrari. So we made that change, but we're in that process right now with SEO National, where we like the site design and look of it, but we need to address some speed issues and just some clarity issues. And we're in that dance right now, which is what it is. I mean, it's kind of like this balancing act of, we're not going to be building it just for speed and, trying to sell a bunch of widgets, because it's our personality that we're trying to reflect as well. So the one thing that I will say is Damon and his team, if you go through that experience with them, and somebody may even ask, well, what's that cost? I can tell you about what we're paying for us, which is a few grand a month. And we are seeing, results. Has it paid for itself yet? I'm not sure. Yeah, we've had definitely more inquiries. We've had more that were kind of under our radar, as far as under our kind of threshold for the right size client, but we're seeing better and better and better. So it is a longer term deal, but I'm confident that we're on the right path. But the experience in dealing with Damon and his team is really phenomenal. I mean, I told our marketing team, like, hey, let's take a page out of how they serve people. That's how we want to be known. We want to serve first as well. But you guys do an excellent job of that, Damon. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
Jack, you got a question?
Yes. So is there a way to create a subset of SEO that funnels into somewhere else? And here are some examples. You have a distributor that the manufacturer controls the website, the landing pages, and everything else, but that distributor feels like there may be more that could be done to direct them to that landing site that is controlled by the manufacturer. Similarly, a franchisee who may be permitted, many cases they're not permitted to do their own thing, but if they were permitted, for them to be able to create SEO, and which funnels into the page that's created by the franchisor. And the third example would be someone like me that, okay, I feel like there can be more done for SEO for my personal brand as an attorney within Shoemaker. And, we have a phenomenal IT group that does a phenomenal job, but the scale of it has to be across the board. So if I feel like maybe there's something that's more beneficial to me because I have a franchise practice that I think that might be able to spin things and I'm willing to pay for it, is there a way to increase that and then have those results funnel into and literally funnel into the site that's out of my control, out of the distributor's control, out of the franchisee's control?
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, you give great examples with franchises, and I see this a lot with like insurance brokers too. Is we'll have somebody that's really successful as a broker in whatever ways they're currently marketing themselves, and then they're like, well, if I could add an SEO and show up locally, then that would be even better. But then what they usually the hurdle you run into is less on the technical side or the viability of is it possible, and more the red tape. Whether it's the franchise or the broker serving the agency. And so you can, like, a really simple way to think about this is you can only optimize what you can control. And so the first hurdle is, do you have the approval to create your own domain? And so if you can run your own website, then yes, you can start that process. Now, the next potential hurdle that you run into is like, okay, let's say you get the approval, you build your own website, you dial in the structure, you have an effective content strategy. Then what you'd have to do is have that call to action go to whatever third party thing. And so that's where you have some disconnect, because one is that your conversion rate will drop. Anytime you change domains and branding and imagery, there's a subconscious disconnect of trust, because they're ready to take an action and then everything just changed. And so your conversion rate is going to be lower. And then the other issue it creates is, unless your other vendor that you're sending the call to action to allows you to set up cross-domain analytic tracking, you can't track the conversion through. And so Google pays attention to when people exit, So they're just going to see that you're telling everybody to exit. And so you
Mm,
have this constant hurdle of your goal is getting people to exit, which is also a negative characteristic of SEO.
interesting. Greg asked a question: is there a difference in sliders with individual photos versus videos, and are are equally bad? I don't think that they're equally bad, but size and load time is an important thing, right?
Yeah, I mean the issue, so the biggest issue with videos is load time. Videos are a heavy asset. And so there's a tool you can use called GT Metrics. It's GTMetrix. I don't know if they have free. They were free for years, but I think they recently went paid only. Um, but it's relatively inexpensive. I mean, it's a great paid tool. You type in your website and it'll tell you your page speed. It'll give you like a letter grade and this and that. Don't pay attention to the letter grades. Pay attention to the metric that says fully loaded time. And what that is how long does it take your website to load top to bottom? And you want that to be 3 seconds or less. 3 seconds or less is the baseline. That's not the home run. And so home run would be like 1 second. And so usually what we see is most websites are somewhere between like 5 and 10 seconds. So half of your people are leaving before they even see your website and your messaging. So that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's like, do you want the bragging rights of a video, or do you want people to, and half people don't even see it? Or do you want to recapture 50% of your people that would have left because of the slow page load and not have a video? So videos, the issue is two things. The biggest one is the speed impact, and two is it a distraction? Like, does it actually serve a purpose of educating them on what the product or service is, or just does it look hypey? Images are those and other things. So like the carousels, you have your potential issue for page delay load. You have your issue for distraction because it's like, do I look at slide 1 or 5? And then, I'm willing to bet that everybody listening, last time you've been to a website or the next time you go to one that has a slider, you're never ever waiting to be curious what the next slide is. So your customers aren't either. So nobody's sitting there going, oh man, there's like 5 slides on here. Can't wait to check out what 3 and 4 are. So it's like we do all these things where, that Yoast Slider Stuck article says less than 1% of people, like they have data, less than 1% of people click or care what's on a slider. So you've now made it load slower. It's often makes your website not as mobile friendly. It's distracting on your call to action, your value propositions, and statistically nobody cares. So there's all these disadvantages for no advantage.
Yeah, it's interesting. One thing that I can say, we had a very well qualified group that came through because of through the website, and they said, and they're very bright. These guys were already operating on a much higher level from a tax strategy standpoint than anybody we've seen come through. And they said, we checked out all of your videos. Love, the stuff that Adam throws out, because he does a lot of really good explainer type videos. But he said, we come through everything that was available and really liked your stuff. Oh, well, that's cool. That is that's one group's journey. But if you're it seems like there's this balance of like, I got your attention and I'm driving you, versus somebody that is really interested in going deeper, deeper, deeper. Help me understand more about these guys, where they're going to, because that's not the norm, right? I mean, most people are not going to spend that kind of research, I think. Maybe further down the journey. I don't know.
Well, the videos can go like there's two different types of videos that we're kind of talking about here. One is the aesthetic one that's generally on your homepage. That's the one with all the negative characteristics.
Yeah.
Informative videos, like you're generally not putting like a 10-minute informative video on your
Right.
homepage. So those content ones, those can go in the blog area, the FAQs, the video gallery, things like that. I think that's a different intention.
Okay, cool. And then, I know oh man, we're at 12 o'clock. Any last questions? We got another one that just popped up here. Will there be a recorded version? Yes, there will be. It will be on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on this afternoon. And same way, Shoemaker Law has the same sort of thing on YouTube. Let's see. Can Damon touch on the other two questions about backlinks and Google review importance? Google review importance.
Google reviews will matter more in a geographical region. So those reviews are more effective for local brick and mortar businesses because those show up in Maps results, and your Maps results generally only show up in a 5 to 10 mile radius. And so if you're in a more competitive space or a bigger metro area, that radius is even smaller. And so those will really help on brick and mortar businesses because one, it takes up a bigger chunk of real estate on the search results, so it has a greater visibility. And then obviously the reinforcement of positive reviews. For national and international brands, less. It doesn't affect them as much. We have, like with our agency, we have 150 something 5-star reviews, but we don't focus specifically on local audiences. And I couldn't tell you that anybody has ever mentioned a single thing about reviews or finding us on Maps. So it largely just depends on there's no disadvantages to them. I just would have realistic expectations of where they show up and when they are of a positive advantage.
Backlinks, any thoughts on that, the importance or detriment of that?
Yeah, that's changed greatly with the quality over quantity game. That used to be a big kind of quantity thing. I remember, way back in the day, you could systematize these links, and so you could add your website and your keywords and just automate effectively spamming sites to get your link. And SEOs would do, nowadays, if you're aiming for like 5 a month, like back then it was like 2,000 a month because it was just quantity over quality back then. Now, it's still a big part of Google's algorithm. In my personal opinion, it's become diluted over time because, marketers like to abuse things. And so even though it's flipped from quantity to quality, I still think Google's looking to dial it in more. Like how can they improve their results with variables that are less manipulated by SEOs and webmasters? And so the majority of our clients, we focus on a content first strategy. And there are some clients that we don't even have to do backlinks at all. And they'll outrank bigger players with thousands of backlinks. And so it's certainly a quality play if you do them. Again, with realistic expectations, there's no fast or cheap backlinks. They are either a massive consumption of your time if you do them on your own, or they're a huge out-of-pocket cost if you source good ones.
All right. Well, we've gone over a few minutes. Damon, thank you for your time. You are a go-giver, and I can vouch for that personally. I really appreciate you lending your expertise to kind of help demystify what can become a very complex and confusing landscape.
Yeah.
So thank you. Really appreciate that. Adam and Jack, always appreciate you guys. We've got another guest next week. Stay tuned for that one. But that'll be great. So Jack, thanks for lining that up. In the meantime, check out BGW and CPA YouTube channel, as well as not Santanello's, but it's Shoemaker's. And Jack probably has his own. But anyway, Damon, thanks again. SEO National, if anybody wants to check those guys out, SEO National. Damon's on LinkedIn and quite active. So thanks again, Damon.
Good to see you, Gary. Good to see you,
Thank
Adam.
you,
Thanks,
Damon.
Jack. We'll see you
Thanks,
guys.
guys.
See y'all. Bye-bye.